Welcome to the Golden State Media Concepts, America's Still Beautiful podcast, a weekly news podcast covering all the top positive and uplifting news stories. Are you tired of the same old news? Are you sick of the seemingly endless political spin and negativity? We cover stories that will inspire, uplift, and remind you of the good in the world. Tune into the Golden State Media Concepts, America's Still Beautiful podcast to get all the great and positive news stories of today.
The GSMC America's Still Beautiful podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Podcast Network. I'm your host, Emily Ferrier, here to bring you some uplifting stories in these trying times. So, for our first story, if you've ever liked or supported a page on Facebook that has to do with plastic pollution, you've probably seen an advertisement for a $20 bracelet made of plastic yanked from the ocean. 4Ocean removes 1 pound of trash from the world's oceans per bracelet purchased. And after a long, almost 3-year slog, 4Ocean is closing in on 8 million pounds of trash pulled from the sea. Cleanup efforts are currently underway in Florida, Bali, and Haiti, and now 4Ocean is expanding its presence in operations into Central America, an area that's suffering from a blight earning in the Munkar Trash Islands. Tens of millions of pounds of ocean trash are believed to be floating in and along Central America's ocean and coastlines due to minimal infrastructure and multiple river systems flowing from city centers directly into the oceans. The 4Ocean founders, Andrew Cooper and Alex Schultz, who were included in Forbes 30 Entrepreneurs Under 30 last year, in Rio Montega and Guatemala, as a critical opportunity to stem the tide of garbage moving into the ocean. Expanding our cleanup operations into Central America offers us an opportunity to create significant change into the ocean plastic crisis, says Schultz. Our plan is not only to remove millions of pounds of plastic by leveraging initiative cleanup technologies, but also to stop plastic pollution at its source by working with local communities to change plastic consumption habits. Upon opening its Central American operations, 4Ocean aims to employ more than 20 local workers and utilize 6 trash collecting vessels, as well as the 4Ocean mobile skimmer, an original watercraft designed to remove large quantities of debris in high-density areas. In addition, they will install boom collection systems at large river mouths to minimize the amount of pollution that enters the ocean in the first place. Last week, 4Ocean's Haiti team removed 65,000 pounds of trash from the ocean and rivers, according to press contacts. 4Ocean is aiming to remove 1 million pounds from garbage from Rio Montega in the Central American Atlantic for the first year on site. 4Ocean is not only the group extinguishing trash in the world's rivers, the only one. Boyan Slat, the young Dutch engineer who's collecting shipping containers and trash from the Great Pacific Garbage Patch, recently expanded his gaze to include the worst polluted rivers. So we're going to talk a little bit about him as well. Boyan Slat is the youngest engineer responsible for the organization that recently collected 2 shipping containers of trash from the Great Pacific Garbage Patch for the first time in history. And so now he's also set his sights on the source of the most water pollution. He said that during his oceanic cleanup vessels that were collecting ocean, or that were on the path of ocean currents, allowing vast amounts of plastic waste to drive themselves towards his device before being hoovered up and moved to shore for recycling. He's also confirmed that they are capturing even microplastics that are 1 millimeter in size, completely microscopic, tiny, 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 tiny little microplastics. But simultaneously, he's also tackling a related issue, a facet that is just as critical to the overall plastic pollution problem: the world's most littered rivers. Slat and his organization, the Ocean Cleanup, began targeting the river pollution after their research revealed that 1,000 of the world's rivers are responsible for depositing 80% of the trash that is currently swirling around the ocean. 80%. By turning off the taps, they say, and catching the plastic along the river's course, the much more difficult task of capturing it in the ocean can be mostly avoided. Enter Slat's latest creation, the Interceptor. What a name. Very fantastic, like sort of space-agey kind of name for it. Very good. An efficient solar-powered barge that gobbles up plastic river in the plastic garbage from the river. The Interceptor collects trash by extending a water-permeable barrier halfway across the river. Conveyor belt at the front of the Interceptor then scoops the plastic out of the water and deposits it into a shuttle that then moves it across the length of the barge and deposits it into the trash in one of the 6 dumpsters, which can be remotely monitored by an onshore crew. Once full, the dumpsters, which sit on a separate barge, can be removed by another boat and brought ashore for recycling. At top performance, the Interceptor can extract 2,200,000 pounds of trash per day. And with several interceptors placed along key or narrower parts of the river, minimal amounts of garbage are ever likely to reach the ocean. Slat's goal is to have interceptors in all 1,000 of the worst polluting rivers by 2025, so 5 years from now. The Interceptor is scalable and easily manufactured, allowing it to be more widely available in poorer countries where population is at its worst because waste disposal is far less developed than in most Western countries. Currently, the Ocean Cleanup has interceptors in the Klang River, Kahlua Lupar, which is among the 50 worst rivers for pollution, and the Sengkarang Drain in Jakarta. The Ocean Cleanup will help anyone looking to lobby their local governments for implementation of the Interceptor into their own rivers, which readers can explore, or listeners can explore by visiting the organization's website. And you can also donate to the interceptors and ships if you have that readily available. Otherwise, maybe your way of supporting it would be buying one of those plastic bracelets. Valentine's Day is coming up. So nothing says I love you like a bracelet made of trash. I'm kidding, but I genuinely think I would really like to receive one of these bracelets for Valentine's Day. So if anybody wants to send me a gift, I will happily take that. So when we come back from the break, we're going to stick with plastics and recycling, but we're going to talk a little bit about how to convert plastics into other things to recycle them, as obviously we need to do something with these things to recycle them. We can't just sort of, for those of you that don't know how recycling works, like myself, so it's talking about the different ways that we're now recycling, and we're going to talk about 2 different initiatives that are starting up when we come back from the break.
The GSMC Life and Happiness podcast takes you on a journey of exploration. We'll discuss tried and true methods alongside the latest trends of how to best live your life to its fullest and happiest. From psychology to meditation, science to self-help books, the GSMC Life and Happiness podcast will help you to discover what makes you happy and how you can live life being the best you possible. Download the GSMC Life and Happiness podcast on iTunes, Stitcher, SoundCloud, Google Play, or anywhere you find podcasts. Just type GSMC in the search bar.
Before the break, we were talking about the efforts made to clean up the ocean from its plastics, and now we're going to talk about some different initiatives of what they're going to be doing with these plastics once they are removed from the ocean. So first off, an Indiana plastics processing operation will consume roughly 40 million pounds of plastic from e-scrape and other products annually. Brightmark Energy plans to start up the facility in mid-2020. So construction started on this last May, and it should be on this plant in May of last year, and it should be ready by mid-2020 this year. So this is just an update on this Brightmark Energy plant. The operation, currently in development in Ashley, Indiana, will bring in a variety of plastics, particularly materials in the mixed plastic areas 3 to 7, the numbers 3 to 7 stream. So when you look at the bottom of your thing that you're going to recycle, if it's a number between 3 to 7, this is what they're going to be recycling. The facility, which is being developed by San Francisco Waste and Energy Commercialization from Brightmark Energy this week, announced a partnership with an e-scrape company. Recycle Force, an Indianapolis nonprofit e-scrape organization, will supply Brightmark with up to 3.4 million pounds per month of ABS, PC, and other polymers from TVs, computers, medical devices, car seats, and other products. An interview with Brightmark CEO Bob Powell said the facility will use a pyrolysis processor to convert plastic waste into a few types of fuels or other chemical products that include commercial-grade waxes. Pyrolysis involves chemically breaking down materials by heating them in oxygenless environments. If the plastics are baled, we will debale those plastics and feed them into our process where we shred, dry, and pelletize into very small pellets. Powell says pellets are then fed into the pyrolysis system, which converts them into low ultra-sulfur diesel and naphtha blend stocks, which are then used in fuel production. The facility broke ground in April. Oh, sorry, I thought it was May. In April, after receiving $260 million in funding, located on a 40-acre site. The plant is on schedule to be completed in the late summer or in the late spring or early summer of 2020, and to be operating in full production scale by the end of the year. Another development of a domestic e-plastics outlet comes at a time of turbulence for the low-value materials. China, once the largest consumer of plastics recovered from electronics, stopped importing those and other plastics in 2018. So in the wake of this, other countries have enacted similar restrictions. Most recently, India, which has clamped down on its scrap plastic imports since last summer. Processors experience significant disruptions in e-plastics movements because of these policies, More recently, operators have been able to move e-plastics into certain Asian markets, but only the highest quality materials at a depressed price. Our timing is opportune here with the challenges of shipping to places like China, Powell says. Right now, I've got 10 semi-trucks worth of plastic sitting here ready to ship out to Brightmark's plant as soon as it's up and running, says Andrew King, Inventory and Control Director at Recycle Force. That's 10 semis worth of product that I haven't been able to process because of the China recycling glut that we're facing in the United States. The second these trucks leave our recycling with Brightmark, we can bring in more materials. It's down the street. I don't have to worry about exports. I don't have to worry about parts going down. I don't have to worry about people not accepting material. All of a sudden, I have a domestic person to take all of my mixed plastic, King explains. So Brightmark also says that Recycle Force will provide an ample supply of e-plastics, and the facility is not currently looking for additional suppliers, but Powell noted that the company's expansion plans, Brightmark anticipates growing the Ashley, Indiana facility up to 8 times its initial size as the operation scales up. And the company recently completed a nationwide survey to ask communities at their level of interest in the Brightmark facility located in their region. And the survey yielded a triple-digit list of communities with interest. As well as expand at their site or build at other sites, we would absolutely seek to have partners that recycle e-waste materials and get plastics there, he said. Powell declined to comment specifically on the financial structure of the contract with Recycle Force. However, he noted that Brightmark's model to pay suppliers rather than charge a tip fee. Even though plastic markets are at a point where the facility could possibly charge for material, Brightmark chooses this structure to create sustainable business model. That means not only are our projects sustainable, but we want to provide the right incentives for those like Recycle Force to process and bring our plastics. We've designed it so we pay a little bit of money to create a sustainable business model. In addition to Recycle Force being conveniently located near the Ashley plant, Powell says Brightmark was interested in working with the organization because of its social mission. Recycle Force employs formerly incarcerated individuals as well, aiming to reduce recidivism through workforce training and employment. So not only is this incredible initiative helping out our world by recycling these plastics, but it is also giving people jobs that wouldn't necessarily be getting an opportunity for a position like this. So I really loved hearing all about the developments in the recycling world. Obviously, it's very important that we are doing our best to keep the earth clean and to recycle plastics that are used or have been used or were collected from the ocean, like we talked about in the first segment, because that is the only way to sustain our world. There's also some efforts in the UK to be melting down plastic to change its properties, and chemically recycle in that way. So there are a lot of things going on to save our world, really. So yeah, I think this is a really beautiful thing that's been happening, and obviously we still have a very, very long way to go. But this has been a really positive story for me, and I hope that you guys liked it as well. When we come back, we're going to talk about some really sweet stories of dogs saving people, and then something that people ended up doing for the conservation of wild dogs. So we're going to talk about that when we get back from our break. Stay tuned.
This is your ultimate stop for everything sports. The Golden State Media Concepts Sports Podcast. Should I say more? From the NFL, MLB, the NBA to MMA, it's all in here. The Golden State Media Concepts Sports Podcast. Listen now.
When we left off, we were talking about one of the basic things that you learn in elementary school, reducing, reusing, and recycling, that, to be honest, I can absolutely do this all the time. I often don't do that well and don't think about, just because I feel like I haven't had to as much. But now it's very dire that we need to be doing that. And now we're going to talk about some really lovely canine stories. Obviously, mankind has always had a close affinity with its canine relatives, man's best friend and all of that, woman's best friend. While enjoying their companionship and unquestioning loyalty, there are some genuine heroes in every sense of the world in the dog community. So we're going to talk about some really incredible canine heroes who've risked their own lives for the lives of humans. The first one, in Mount Hood, Oregon, the 3 mountain climbers became stranded. They had set out on a cold, clear Saturday in Portland, Oregon, for a weekend trek to tackle the state's tallest mountain. The ascent went to plan, but when they reached the summit, a storm blew and it was snowing very heavily. Trevor Liston had to watch in horror as his friend Maddie Bryant and 2 other team members slipped and disappeared over an icy ledge, and a dog, Velvet, as well. And the remainder of the team tried to locate their companions to no avail. And it was not until the following morning that the Portland Mountain Rescue found the missing climbers. The rescuers are certain that the dog's body heat saved the climbers' lives as they hunkered down for the night with 70-mile-per-hour winds and an 11,000 feet. So, yeah, there's a dog just using his own little body heat to keep everyone else warm. Another one, Shanna, a German Shepherd, saved her owners Eve and Norman Ferding, both of whom were in their 80s, from a sudden blizzard that hit upstate New York. Norm and Eve, who run a wildlife sanctuary in Alden, New York, had been tending to animals on the property when a huge blizzard blew in. Trees were blown down, and the elderly couple found themselves trapped between outbuildings, huddling for warmth and cover as best they could. At this point, Shanna, their German Shepherd Cross, arrived on the scene. She dug a path through the snow, and then began to dig beneath a fallen tree. The Ferdings looked on as the dog spent 2 hours gradually creating a tunnel. She then pulled them through the tunnel, under a tree, and through a gap in the fence home safely. Then used her body heat to keep them warm until the storm passed and the electricity came on. So that one is absolutely incredible and really makes you feel like dogs are really looking out for us. This one is a story that I know well because it is one of my favorite children's movies of all time. The Huskies, who work in the frozen north, are known well for their stamina and bravery. And one dog came to international attention in the 1920s during a life-threatening epidemic that had broken out in Nome, Alaska, and the dogs were the only hope of getting medical supplies to the stricken community in time. what became known as the 1925 Sarum Run to Nome, a husky called Balto led a team of dogs on a month-long mission to into the wilderness. Blizzard conditions where temperatures plummeted to negative 45 degrees Celsius. After completing the journey successfully, Balto became a film star, yes, in a locally made short entitled Balto's Race to Nome, and of course, Balto, the Fox animated film as well, that I recommend you check out. In other news, a remarkable legislative move that increased the amount of protected areas for wildlife in Germany by 25% in 2015. About 76,000 acres of protected land, according to The Independent. They've decided to give past these no-go zones from the Cold War back to nature. So, during the 50-year-long standoff in the Iron Curtain between East and West Germany, minimal human activity along the Soviet-NATO border allowed the wildlife to be chased out of their parts of Europe to recover in a relative peace. So, the scientists have now realized the lack of human activity and created natural sanctuaries for endangered European wildlife. The 62 decommissioned German military bases, located on the West German side of the Iron Curtain, now became a habitat for middle-spotted woodpeckers and spotted eagles, as well as the beautiful wolf. So, wolves have now settled up in this abandoned military base. The first litter of pups in Germany were reportedly in 2001, and the monitoring data showed that their numbers are rising. Due to poaching, it was found that most wolf packs across Germany favored military bases over wildlife refuges, even though the refuges possessed fewer roads and larger, denser sections of forest. The wildlife ecologist at Swedish University of Agricultural Sciences, Guillaume Chaperon, suggested that since deer populations on military bases aren't managed by hunting, it means fewer poachers or hunters are coming in contact with the wolves there. Coupled with the lack of soldiers in wars, Chaperon suggests that 62 decommissioned sites in 2015, all military bases stated to be closed, should be turned into nature reserves for that reason. Bases and military installations in other countries along the Iron Curtain were closed down and turned into wildlife refuges thanks in part to the European Green Belt Initiative, led by former Soviet Union Mikhail Gorbachev, and his grassroots non-profit international union for the conservation of nature. Today, the backbone of green runs from the very northern tip of Finland down into Greece and eastward across the Carpathians before hitting the border with Turkey. So I put these stories together because I thought that the lovely, amazing, heroic efforts of the dogs that over time have been saving humans in miraculous, beautiful ways, we've now taken something that was a symbol of destruction and war and created a safe haven for the very dogs that have saved us in the past. So I really liked this story and these several stories, and I am so happy to hear that there is a safe haven for these dogs now. When we come back, we're going to talk about an effort to use rainwater to save our environment when we return.
Want to find out what movies to go see? Then check out the GSMC Movie Podcast. It's your ticket to the latest movies, whether it's a new blockbuster event, romantic, comedy, or action flick. This show has got it all covered. They talk some what to go see now. Don't bother. What's hot on Netflix and everything in between. That's gsmcpodcast.com/movie-podcast. When it's all about the movies, it has to be this new show. Don't forget to like them on Facebook and follow them on Twitter. Visit gsmcpodcast.com for more info.
For the break, we left off talking about the conservation of environments for wolves, and now we're going to talk about another form of conservation and another way of helping out the earth, which seems to be a theme of today's pod. This one comes to you from a town in the United States. Obviously, America is still beautiful. Where we're using rainwater runoff that is notorious for polluting urban waterways by sweeping up all the chemicals, pesticides, heavy metals, bacteria, and automotive oils in these dense metropolitan areas. However, cities across the west coast of the United States are rapidly applying a simple new method for combating rainwater runoff: gardens. The aptly named rain gardens, also known as bioswales, are specifically designed to capture roof runoff and filter water before it enters the urban sewer system through city storm drains. And they don't look half bad from the front of your house either. According to a National Water Quality Inventory report to Congress, rainwater runoff is the second greatest polluter of water estuaries, critical ecosystems for the health of shorelines and migratory aquatic bird populations. During storm events or heavy snowmelts, single facilities that treat both stormwater and sanitary sewage may become overloaded from urban rainwater runoff and discharge untreated waste into surface waters. Bioswales are typically planted on a slope above the roadside or sidewalk and below the level of a front porch to typical house or building. This allows water flowing off of roofs, stairs, gutters, parking lots, and others to run down across the bioswale, ensuring maximum absorption of toxins and pollutions. City of Portland specifically has become one of the many West Coast cities to have hopped on the bioswale train in the U.S. Over the course of the last 10 years, Portland has been helping citizens install these bioswales in their front and back gardens. Not only that, but legislators have even gone so far as to take care of the bill. That's right, so they will not only install it, but they will pay for it as well. Bioswales are a part of a massive overhaul of the Portland sewer system called the Green Streets Initiative. Green Streets reduces and manages rainwater runoff through the interception, transportation, through fall, and attention, details of the authors of Green Streets Policy Report. One of the most closely monitored facilities in Glencoe Rain Garden has performed extremely well and retained 94% of the runoff. According to a report from the Sunset, a project will add 83 Green Street Policy rain gardens and planters to filter 7.1 million gallons of runoff, ensuring the water has greatly reduced its pollutant potential before entering the sewer system. As mentioned in the Green Streets report, the potential certain plants have removed pollutants like oils, toxic chemicals, heavy metals, and harmful bacteria as high as 90%, while sediment content can be reduced by 80%. Since the gardens are also naturally drained and dried in 12 to 48 hours, there's no risk of bioswales becoming mosquito breeding centers, if you were worried about that. So, PP Environmental created this simple DIY tutorial for building your own bioswale in front of your house, near a creek, fresh water source, etc., while Portland City authorities have also launched a page where you can apply to have the percentage cost of installing a bioswale recovered. So I'm going to read you a quick little tutorial on how to build your own bioswale. In an effort to share practices for best non-point source pollution management, here is the tutorial on how to build your own bioswale. Step 1, pick your site. A bioswale should be at least 10 feet away from your home, office, or other structure. Mini bioswale planting located near a vineyard, up a hill, so bioswale could potentially catch the runoff before it enters a creek. When picking a site, keep your eye out for a low point. Typically, you should be able to spot a 1% grade slope from your driveway, parking lot, or roof leading to your yard or office. 2, determine the size. Determining the size is one of the most important steps in creating your own bioswale. If you're familiar with the area, you might think you could give it an educated guess, but we recommend you use a bioswale calculator to properly determine size and water ratios and volumes. So there's a calculator you can use online there. Step 3, dig. This is the part where you get to dust off some tools and gloves and work up a sweat. After determining the size and location, you can start removing some earth. Your bioswale needs to be at least 6 or 12 inches deep and can be deeper depending on water amounts. When you're digging, make sure there's a gradual slope from the edges to the center. This will allow your bioswale to collect the rain, which will feed the plants and ultimately limit pollution. If there's a downspout nearby, make sure it's facing the bioswale, or dig a small ditch from the downspout to make sure the water enters. Step 4, select your plants. So this will vary region to region, no matter where you are. You want to fill your bioswale with native plants from the area. This is important to vitalize the area you picked and promote native plants instead of those annoying invasive species like crabgrass and more. So do a little research before selecting to fill your landscape with plants that want to survive. Typical mix of plants include sedges, grasses, and trees to secure the area. In our bioswale, we use sedges and grasses along the edges to secure the banks when planting dogwood and other pollution eaters, where the water collects, and surround the area with native roses like cottonwood and elderwood. And number 5, the final step, secure the site. This is where you'll need some jute netting and native wildflower grass seeds. After planting is complete, you can secure the area from erosion with jute netting alongside the bioswale edges. The jute will help prevent against erosion and keep the natural slope of the site intact. Secure the netting with some staples, and you should have a good foundation on the area. This will help promote native plants, like the step before, and hopefully keep out the invasive crabgrass and more. Once you've completed that step, you're done. With a good team, you can learn how to build a bioswale and have it planted and ready in a few days' time. So that's how to make your very own bioswale. If you would like to do that to help out our environment, really recommend that you do. This sounds like a great idea. I know I'm going to be making one of these myself. So when we return, we're going to talk about some wonderful ways that Denver, Colorado are helping persons who cannot afford a home, and another city as well, when we come back from the break.
pets bring such joy to our lives, and the GSMC Pets podcast is here to share in that joy. We'll tell stories of pets finding their forever homes, acting in unexpected ways, being helpful, or just being silly. Whether you love dogs, cats, llamas, reptiles, fish, or you've never met an animal you didn't like, the GSMC Pets podcast is for you.
Before the break, we were talking about initiatives to help the environment via rain runoff and bioswales in Portland. And now we're going to go to Denver, Colorado, where the price of housing continues to rise, but opportunities to create low-income housing are expensive and take years to build. So when the Quality Inn and Suites in Quebec Street went up for sale, the president of the Colorado Coalition for the Homeless, CCH, as I'll refer to, saw a golden opportunity. John Pervensky snapped up the 139-room complex for $8.4 million, secured it with a mixture of private city and state funds, and completed some brief renovations before christening it Fusion Studios. Fusion Studios, serving a variety of people in need, represents the 17th building he's opened in 3 decades of work. Rooms are expected to be available for the people who come right in off the street or from shelters across the city as soon as the end of the month. For renters, vouchers can be secured by prospective tenants from the same state and city to ensure that no more than 30% is required from their incomes for rent. Pervensky said on average, tenants can manage about $100 a month, with a lot of it coming in from other benefits such as disability payments received. The floor and room plan divided up by a person's circumstances rather than size and luxury. 28 rooms will be set aside for those awaiting trial for low-level crimes like public urination and trespassing. Another 10 are reserved for homeless folks who find themselves frequenting Denver public hospitals. For individuals looking to move on and other forms of formal, affordable, and permanent housing, or who have had housing currently being constructed for them, and the 25 rooms have been set aside. Britta Fisher, head of Denver's housing department, called Fusion Studios practically instant housing. We all know that we need more housing units, that we need them quickly, she told the Denverite during Tuesday's opening ceremony. I hope we can replicate this model and partnerships at other sites in Denver. In other news, in another state, the groundbreaking new homeless shelter in Seattle is the first facility of its kind that has been designated for Native Americans, by Native Americans for Native Americans, and has already helped take in dozens of people from the streets. Despite how Native Americans only make up about 1% of the U.S. homeless population, they make up 10% of the country's homeless. So that is a significant amount there. Furthermore, there are more than 1,000 Native Alaskans, American Indians, and Pacific Islanders living in Seattle alone. That's why Chief Seattle Club nonprofit is dedicated to ending Native homelessness. Launched in the Eagle Village settlement in Sodom neighborhood of Seattle back in November. The village is made up of several dozen trailers that can comfortably house 2 people at a time. Collectively, the village can house up to 31 people who may need access to resources or stable living conditions until they can find arrangement for permanent housing. Not only are the trailers sufficiently spacious for the residents of the village, also boats a medicine garden, traditional healing circles, and an on-site case management and resources. Managers of the $3.3 million village now hope that their trailblazing new initiative will inspire other cities to tackle the disproportionate amount of native homeless people in America. It's been a really rough road for me to travel. 70-year-old Eagle Village resident Patricia St. Mark's tearfully told Quo on the site's opening day. Knowing I'm going to have a place to live near Eagle Village and move into my home one day has put my heart into a permanent smile. And now I wake up feeling free. So those are two incredible places that are helping the homeless find a safe haven to live, at least until they can get themselves back on their feet. So those are really, really beautiful stories. And there's another one actually from Canada where more than a dozen former members of the Canadian Armed Forces have been forced to sleep on the street will properly have roofs over their heads. So Homes for Heroes Village in Calgary is the nation's first housing complex built exclusively for homeless veterans, and the residents are ready to move in. Village is made of 15 houses, all of which have been equipped from everything from cable and internet to fully functioning kitchens and outdoor decks. The complex has also been equipped with additional on-site resources such as mental health support, counseling, career training, mentoring, case management, and even community gardens to create a sense of community and nature within this area. Our team at the Homes for Heroes Foundation has met hundreds of veterans who are in crisis and experiencing homelessness, said Homes for Heroes Foundation President David Howard. We wanted to build a program that can help with successful transition to civilian life. Our veterans are proud warriors, proud of their service, and proud to be citizens of Canada. They want a hand up, not a handout. We listened to what they had to say, and we designed our foundation around meeting their needs. The village was built by ATCO, a Calgary-based global provider of integrated energy housing, transportation, and infrastructure solutions through a $1.5 million in-kind donation. Though this is the first village of its kind in Canada, the Homes for Heroes Foundation has already had additional land agreements for more villages in Edmonton and Ontario. I expect this to end the issue of veterans experiencing homelessness. I think we can do that with a 12 to 13 year period. It's an absolutely beautiful goal and beautiful news from our brothers from the north. So I hope you enjoyed those stories of these positive steps forward for people that have had a lot less than most of us. If you're listening to this podcast, I could be assuming this wrongly, but I assume that you probably have a place to live. So, this is great news for the future. When we come back, we're going to talk about today in history when we return.
The GSMC Life and Happiness Podcast takes you on a journey of exploration. We'll discuss tried and true methods alongside the latest trends of how to best live your life to its fullest and happiest. From psychology to meditation, science to self-help books, the GSMC Life and Happiness Podcast will help you to discover what makes you happy and how you can live life being the best you possible. Download the GSMC Life and Happiness Podcast on iTunes, Stitcher, SoundCloud, Google Play, or anywhere you find podcasts. Just type GSMC in the search bar.
Welcome back. So before, we were talking about some incredible feats made in homelessness in America and Canada as well. And now I wanted to bring it back to our final segment where I've done this before on the pod, and I hope that you guys like it. I wanted to do a sum up of the good news from today historically. So over time, the positive and exciting things that have happened on today, which is the day I'm recording is February the 4th. So we're going to talk about that in today's history. 50 years ago today, the Oscar-winning film Patton premiered in New York City. The epic war drama starred George C. Scott as World War II military general George S. Patton. Patton won 7 Academy Awards, including Best Picture, Best Director, Best Original Screenplay, and Best Actor. The opening monologue portrays General Patton with an enormous American flag behind him. In this scene, General Patton is addressing the audience of American troops overseas to raise morale, telling them how winning is everything in America. They just suffered a humiliating defeat in 1943, and Patton is placed in charge of the American Corps in North Africa. So that was a great win for America and a great film that did very well. So that was a little bit of nice news from today, all the way back 50 years ago. A little bit more good news today. Roman Emperor Julian declared equal rights for all religions in the empire in the year 362. Isn't that surprising? I'm quite surprised by that. That happened in the year 362. Britain formally ceased hostilities with its former colonies in the United States of America in 1783 today. So that happened in 1783 on February the 4th. The first elected assembly abolished slavery in France and throughout French territory and all the colonies with a law that came forth during the First Republic under the leadership of Maximilien Robespierre in 1794. That is a huge win and a lovely piece of news. Walt Disney released Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs in 1938 on today's date. Sri Lanka became independent within the British Commonwealth in 1948. The social media network Facebook was founded today's date in 2004. Isn't that crazy? 2004. Isn't it shocking that Facebook is 16 years old today? And on this date, in 2012, American skier Lindsey Vonn clinched her 5th consecutive World Cup downhill title and her 3rd straight Super Combined trophy by winning her 50th World Cup race, the 3rd most victories for a woman in Cup history. And on this day in 1941, the USO was formed to entertain the American troops. So, sort of on a similar vein with the first story that we talked about. Thousands of celebrities have since performed for and visited with soldiers worldwide. For those 50 years, Bob Hope reigned supreme, bringing in his comic one-liners and to the bases overseas during World War II, the Korean War, the Vietnam War. Headline acts included athletes, rock stars, actors, and comedians like John Wayne, Robin Williams, and pin-up girls like Marilyn Monroe and Judy Garland. At the dawn of America's entry into World War II, President Franklin Roosevelt challenged 6 private organizations, including the YMCA, the YWCA, and the Salvation Army, to devise recreational activities for the armed forces. By the end of World War II, the new USO groups had presented more than 250,000 performances in over 200,000 separate visits worldwide and had 1.5 million volunteers helping boost morale. USO were set up in military bases around the U.S., holding dances almost every night, providing a place for military members to simply relax and unwind. Robin Williams went to 6 USO tours in a dozen countries, including Iraq, Afghanistan, and in 2007 said, "There's nothing I enjoy more than traveling with the USO and giving back to our troops whenever I can." In 1964, for the first time, USO brought a full-scale performance into a combat zone. Bob Hope took his Christmas show to Vietnam and started a tradition that endured for the next decade, leading to the establishment of 17 USO centers in Saigon and 6 in Thailand, serving as many as 1 million service members in a month and hosting nearly 6,000 USO shows. On this date in 1968, Wilt Chamberlain accomplished the only double-triple-double to date in pro basketball, totaling 22 points, 25 rebounds, and 21 assists in a single game. Chamberlain is also the only player in the NBA history to record a quadruple double-double game and achieved the feat 8 times in his career. MVP from Philadelphia is most remembered for his 100-point game in 1962, one of basketball's greatest records. Decades later, the closest any player has ever come was the Lakers' Kobe Bryant, who scored 81 points in 2006, after saying that breaking the record was unthinkable. So that is it for all of that news. I really like this idea of summing up all of the news from the past and talking about some incredible things that happened on today's date from the past. I really hope that you guys like that, and if you want me to continue to do that, then I absolutely will. It makes me quite happy to see, historically where we've come and the good news that we've had. So, that's it for all of my news today. I hope that you guys have enjoyed all the stories from today. We had a very heavy environmental one this week. So I think maybe inspired by the Super Bowl and its efforts to go green. So there is beauty in America. Guys, let's try harder to see it. Thank you so much. Thank you so much for listening to the GSMC America Still Beautiful podcast, brought to you, of course, by the GSMC Podcast Network. I'd like to ask that you please remember to subscribe and subscribe to the show and write a nice review. Rate the episode. It really, really, really helps us. Also, please follow us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. Thank you, and have a great night.
You've been listening to the Golden State Media Concepts, America's Still Beautiful podcast, part of the GSMC Podcast Network. You can find this show and others like it at www.gsmcpodcast.com. Download our podcasts on iTunes, Stitcher, SoundCloud, Google Play, or anywhere you find podcasts. Just type in GSMC to find all of our shows. From the GSMC Podcast Network, from social media news to marketing news, and even weird news, the GSMC Podcast Network has you covered. You can also follow us on Twitter and Facebook. Thank you, and we hope you have enjoyed today's episode of the Golden State Media Concepts, America's Still Beautiful podcast.